Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar. Now, to understand, there's been a lot of scary stuff on the internet that I've looked at recently, okay? A lot of ARGs. In fact, the Backrooms video we just made a few days ago, over a week ago, has actually left me in sleepless nights. But if it's something that really raises anxiety in me, it's the emergency broadcast system, or the emergency alert system. So we're gonna get some low rumble up real quickly. Also, for anybody watching this video, one thing I will be modifying are the EAS tones you may hear throughout this video. So anytime you ever hear like distorted audio, it's literally because I'm editing it for two reasons. One of them is to avoid any form of fines from the FCC, because it is actually illegal to broadcast EAS tones in their entirety or their original method. In fact, there are literally shows that have been fined for doing that. And now there's an entire community on YouTube that does this. I'm going to cover myself legally. The other thing is, I also don't want to trigger actual EAS equipment, because from what I understand, if EAS equipment picks up on valid EAS tones, they could actually start a daisy chain and pick things up. I could be wrong on that, but I ain't risking a fine, okay? I ain't risking my cheeks being spread by the US federal government, okay? I'm just putting it out there. Let's get back to the video. To understand, the inspiration for this video has basically been around a recent crisis that's been happening in the world. Now, I don't want to make this super political, but if you don't know, there's something going on in the Ukraine. There's a bit of invasionary stuff going on. There's a bit of tussles with some serious big world powers, most notably the Russian Federation and the United States of America. Look at how cracked out the mod team is on G Fuel right now. Code Talk, by the way, literally editing the article every other hour for Ukraine right now. Things can be a lot better, let me tell you. Now, for some of you people who may be living under a rock, these are the two largest countries in the world. And combined, well, just alone, each of these countries has an armament so strong, so large, so massive, that they could choose to destroy the world not once, not twice, but multiple times over if they wanted to. Why somebody needs to have that many fireworks is beyond me. But something that really leaves me in anxiety is wondering about end-of-the-world scenarios. Now, to understand, I just want to start this video off by, if you have some severe anxiety triggers, maybe this is the video to skip, okay? Maybe you might want to wait until I'm making fun of Mark Zuckerberg and his crappy metaverse, okay? Because that's way more lighthearted. But for those of you who constantly think of the end of the world like I do, well, let me get this started. Now, there's a website that I looked at a long time ago by the name of Exit Mundi. Now, if you never knew this website, basically they cover a lot of end-of-the-world scenarios, or a lot of ways that humanity can come to a definitive halt. For instance, my favorite one is if nothing happens. Basically, in 100 trillion years, when the universe starts cooling, basically we are going to, if we survive that long, that is, we will eventually have to go to sleep to conserve energy. Because, congratulations, energy is not infinite. Basically, when the universe completely cools down, because the universe is cooling after the Big Bang, we're going to have to go to sleep. And the only way to last that long is to turn ourselves into cyborg technology in order to conserve our energy so hard that, of course, we sleep until we can't wake up, until there is no more energy left. But one thing that always makes me wonder is, what happens if the event of a war kicks off? What happens when the big ICBMs go into the sky and start flying towards each other's countries? Well, this is where the emergency broadcast system kicks in. Now, I showed you an example at the beginning of the video, but for those of you who want a quick, dirty example, every time you get an Amber Alert on your phone, you know, the big loud noise with the big notification on it, sometimes it can be something as simple as a weather warning. So, for instance, when we have bad storms, sometimes an Amber Alert kicks up on our cell phones, and yeah, it's a weather warning. Sometimes it could be unfortunate kidnappings or some criminal activities that are happening, and basically what'll happen is the emergency system will gauge the radius of all the people that could potentially help a situation and alerts every single one of them through the emergency broadcasting Amber Alert system. Yes, I know some people are going to sit down and say, it's annoying, I turn it off. I really don't, because I have severe anxiety about these things, and if something bad is about to happen, like a zombie attack, like a supervolcano going off, like nuclear Armageddon, then I would like to know about it as soon as I can so I can start making those adjustments. Maybe I can pour myself a nice glass of bourbon before things come to a screeching halt. Okay, that's pretty much how I choose to live my life. If the end of the world is coming, I at least want to know the last few minutes so I can live and, you know, sort of reflect on life before it all goes boom, done. Now, believe it or not, on YouTube, there's a few channels that actually cover EAS alarms and EAS stuff. Think of it as sort of a niche product on the entire YouTubes. For instance, there's one channel with like 300 subscribers called literally EAS Alarms. Now, I don't know the full validity to it, but they got a few videos on their channel all the way from 9 months ago to 7 months ago. It's a 2-month active channel, okay? It just stopped working at that point. And they cover various EAS alarms. I don't know the validity of some of them, but for instance, some of them actually have real broadcasts. So for instance, this is EAS in Japan. So this is what it sounds like when Japan is going into an emergency broadcast. On TV, of course. It's an earthquake warning. And do you hear that bring bring in the beginning? That might be the most calming yet scary EAS I've heard. That might be the most calming yet actually like super freaky alarm. They're talking about an earthquake, but they got that like cute little Nokia ping going on in the background. Of course, that's Japan right there, and things only escalate as we go through. For instance, Israel sounds downright horrifying if you hear it real quick. That's a pretty S-tier alarm, by the way. It almost sounds like if Siren Head fucking came to your village and started raiding shit up. That's Israel, ladies and gentlemen. And then you've also got Saudi Arabia. So they actually got some dates, for instance, right over here. If you look around, this is during the Gulf War, when a Scud missile was just detected. So 1991 is when they actually heard this. And this is from Saudi Arabia.
Civil defense in the Eastern Province has sounded the danger alarm siren. Please proceed as follows. Put on your gas mask. Stay in a safe place. Stay tuned to Channel 3 television or to 91.4 or 101.4 FM on the radio.
Of course, I always have to have the English in amongst the Arabic that you're listening to, just because some people, during the Gulf War, there were a lot of Americans as well, too. So, you know, English, of course, is the sort of default language all around the world that everyone sort of can kind of understand. And you gotta have everything available, especially for an EAS, especially for this kind of shit. And of course, that's where it kind of ends. Now, EAS kind of alarms are sort of caught out in the wild, and you really kind of have to catch these things as they sort of happen. You know, it's not like we have an example available. Emergency broadcasts will typically start in the event of an emergency or usually during a test. Usually during tests. Now, of course, there's an entire history that I was reading up for a lot of this stuff, and sort of the first thing that we ever had was CANALRAD, which was a control of electromagnetic radiation, which was actually designed during the Truman period during 1951. Then after CANALRAD, they ended up moving into the emergency broadcast system in 1963, then the emergency alert system in 1997, which are the examples that we just heard of. The emergency alert system is different to the emergency broadcast system. But boy, do I have a fun as fuck story for you guys. What happens when there's a big false positive that kicks in? In this case, a false positive was literally one of the actual veterans who was working the emergency system at the time. Their job during a test, which happens every Saturday, is to send one message through teletype. Basically stick a tape in and send a test message so every broadcaster would figure it out. Effectively, what happened is this person, by mistake, put in the wrong tape. This tape in particular actually sent the code word that confirmed that yes, this was not a drill, this was actually an emergency broadcast. I think it took somewhere like 40 minutes for them to say, oh no, let's cancel that. It was actually a test. We promise. There's actually audio of this entire mishap that you can hear right now.
This station has interrupted its regular program at the request of the United States government to participate in the emergency broadcast system serving the Fort Wayne area. During this period, many radio stations will remain on the air, broadcasting news and official information for areas assigned to them.
Now, to understand, this is the moment where they're like, oh, cute little test, well, we'll play along. So basically at 7:33 a.m. local time on that fateful Saturday, Mr. Eberhardt, a 15-year vet of their job, fed the wrong tape into the transmitter that set off a panic that is remembered to this day. He's later quoted by the New York Times as saying, I can't imagine how the hell I did it, but you did. So if you want to actually read the message real quick, we're going to look into it real quick. Message authenticator, hatefulness. This is an emergency action notification, EAN, directed by the president. Normal broadcasting will cease immediately. All stations will broadcast EAN message, one preceded by the attention signal. Per FCC rules, only stations holding NDEA may stay on the air in accordance with their state EBS plan. So again, this was the wrong message that was fed. Now, to be real with you, every time you watch an ARG, like for instance Backrooms, or really any ARG series on YouTube, especially when it comes to like things like Local 58, or when we were looking at the Mandela catalog, a lot of those will use these emergency action scenarios to add that extra fear and tension, to really add that extra flavor of the government communicating to the people in times of severe crisis.
And especially for like creepypastas and ARG channels that typically deal with analog horror, which is some of my favorite horror out there, when you deal with like these ARGs, and especially when they want to world build, nothing is more scarier than a government transmission that is completely done in a very inhuman, sort of very unemotional manner, where they're basically detailing an end of the world scenario or something really, really bad in, again, a very emotionless scenario, literally by just detailing what you can do, how you can possibly survive, and God putting mercy on all of you.
Again, like I showed you earlier, like I told you, when it comes to a lot of these EASs, or when it comes to a lot of these broadcast systems, you really have to catch these things in the act. And this is from the broadcast system as well, too, if you look at it real quick.
This, for example, is an actual broadcast that was captured and resurfaced from Chicago in 1983, where they're literally just testing this scenario for people to watch. Again, test tones and everything have been completely changed up, and this everyone knows is a test. They literally have to give you this giant disclaimer to remind you you are not actually under attack. Pretty cool.
If you want a close scenario of like what this would sound like in reality, there's a few channels that make fictional versions of EASs, which are like sort of their own creepypastas or scary stories or ARGs. Honestly, these guys could make a killing on YouTube Shorts or TikTok if they actually made this kind of content. But some of these channels are like Alert World, for instance, that creates a lot of this kind of stuff. And also there's other channels too out there like the Atlas Fallout Foundation that basically recreate a lot of these EAS scenarios or make sort of fictional ones. One of them I found really good that absolutely left me kind of like stopped for a minute was this Yellowstone Supervolcano drop. Listen to this one real quick.
Also, before we begin, a few other mentions I want to do is give to Harvester and a few other channels, just because this is a small community and I actually want all of them to flourish because they do in fact make a unique take on the whole creepypasta angle. That said though, I will be censoring and modifying some of the EAS tones because like I said in the beginning, I ain't looking to get fined by the FCC. Also, I don't understand exactly what the real law for broadcast may be. I don't know if a YouTube video would count. Also, the thing with EAS tones is it's kind of like dial-up audio, or it's kind of like, you know, machines speaking to other machines through sound. This EAS tone, from what I understand, from what I believe, could in fact actually trigger real EAS equipment that's constantly listening. And I don't want to be responsible for triggering any kind of EAS or Amber Alert or whatever you want to call it just because the video is playing. So I'm going to be modifying as much as I can, basically distorting the audio. So even if you can hear it, a computer should not technically be able to process anything of that nature. That said, don't play this video near any actual EAS equipment, just putting it out there.
About 15 minutes ago, the supervolcano in Yellowstone National Park became active and started to erupt. An earthquake of about 7.8 magnitude is expected with the first impact of the eruption. If you live in the area indicated by the circle, you should proceed immediately to an open area. You should stay away from elevators and balconies. You should not stand on the sides of the building.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Yellowstone National Park basically sits on top of a giant supervolcano that if one day erupts in spectacular fashion, could basically almost bring about the end of like the United States as we know it. It's literally a giant ticking time bomb in the entire world waiting to go off, all right? Now, of course, luckily, hopefully, it'll never actually go off in our lifetime. Hopefully, it won't really go off in anybody's lifetime. I really don't want to see that ever happen to anybody, but yeah, this is one of those national emergencies centered around it. Now, one of the things that makes this stuff really chilling is, again, the very simplistic style of having an emergency alert response and sort of seeing the crisis and breakdown of society happen right in front of you. You can actually see a lot of the inspiration for this stuff comes from SCPs, so they'll actually make like situations regarding SCP stuff over here. But for instance, here's World War III Russia versus NATO scenarios. Now this is a little too clean and nice for a VHS recording, but basically they're straight up telling you that like bombs are about to drop in like 15 minutes, and you better get the fuck up out of Florida if you want to live. Again, that's just America's penis right there. You want to stay far away from that shit.
This is now considered World War III. If you want to be a part of history, join the army and fulfill your duty.
It went straight comical. This is now considered World War III. If you want to be a part, yeah, they just went straight patriotism right there. But yeah, you can sort of see why I have an affinity for this kind of content, because like I'll usually spend like entire nights just like basically going through these EAS channels and going through all their fictional scenarios. Usually the good ones kind of leave a lot of room for the imagination, and they just basically come across as bone-chilling deadpan government as they can. Anytime you get into the point where they like really cover SCPs and really start introducing like visual effects and like glitchy audio, that's when things start to kill it. If it just literally if it feels like something that could be broadcasted on national television, it's scary enough, let me tell you. Now, what really kind of honestly freaks and adds extra further anxiety is like, for me, I don't really have TV service anymore. I only ever have internet. So when I look at TV services, nowadays, I have to imagine, hey, people are switching to things like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, whatever subscription services that exist. And it's because of this cord cutting that, agencies like the FCC are actually implementing new rules. Because back in the day, if you actually look at their guidelines, they actually test EAS stuff weekly. It's not required, but they're testing it weekly, monthly, as much as they can. But because people are switching to like internet-based services, they're trying to implement new legislation to actually get people to switch, basically implement these like emergency action systems in streaming services through geolocation, which is quite smart because, hey, in the event of the world ending, I at least like to know in between episodes of Narcos, just how much time I have on God's green earth. Now, this is where I definitely am put onto a giant registry for sure when I look into this kind of shit, is that what happens when you do get the emergency alert system? What happens when the TV starts freaking? What happens if on the TV back there it's like, all right, Muda, the world's about to end. Toronto is getting litty tonight. Well, it takes about 30 minutes for an entire missile to fly across the entire world. And I didn't know this because I don't really Google ICBM stuff all the time. It's not really on my forte because I'm pigmentally challenged, and if the feds were to raid me and that's what's on my computer search history without a valid reason, it's actually one of the reasons why I'm making the video, just purely for research purposes. Yeah, I'd be getting my ass beaten and waterboarded, okay? Not surprisingly. The interesting things about these like missiles, and again, this is like an old one. This is the Minuteman III MIRV. Basically, from point one, it launches into the air. It actually goes beyond the atmosphere, and once it reaches over here, it separates. The MIRV actually detaches, and all these payloads spread across and rain fucking hell and annihilation on number 8 right here. So it's actually downright goddamn scary. Now again, it takes around 30 minutes for this thing to actually travel from one point to the other. And listen, when it takes 30 minutes to traverse, and that's from like one point to the other, right? There's also the fact that these are hidden in submarines all over the world, owned by the Russian Federation and the United States, and don't get me started on countries like China, India, Pakistan, whatever, that are also nuclear powers. Again, people use this, and the reality is we are safe right now because of a theory known as mutually assured destruction. Basically, the idea is the United States will not blow up Russia, and Russia will not blow up the United States. If Russia sends one missile, the United States sends all their missiles, and then Russia sends all of theirs, and the world has effectively come to a complete halt if that actually ever happens, okay? Basically, if we survive, if I live in Toronto, the entire world's economy and systems have gone basically tits up. We're all basically done at that point. Once these two countries are gone, everyone will slowly be gone. So basically, through mutually assured destruction, we human beings have not killed ourselves. To understand, the only thing that could bring countries together in unison is if like some rogue power ever got their hands on these technologies, every country would launch an investigation to stop whatever rogue party existed. If anything could bring the States, Russia, India, Pakistan, all these countries together, Israel and all the Arab countries, is to stop bad actors from having these, destructive pieces of technology to themselves, okay? Now, I've been on nuclearsecrecy.com/nukemap. I think if you're as old as me, you've probably went to this website in a school library just as sort of like out of pure morbid curiosity. And one of the things is, this is obviously, a way for you to get like evocative numbers. This is not definitive because actually modeling casualties in anything is very difficult scientifically because there's so many variables and extraneous situations that kick in. And also societal situations, variables that can't even be controlled through technology and science. So of course, this is a viewpoint of New York, right? And basically they got a bunch of like cities in this world. Of course, cities that are definitely like target number uno, okay? So places like Chicago, Beijing, China, Islamabad, Pakistan, Tokyo, Japan, okay? Now, if we go to Japan real quick, all right, just Tokyo right now, let's click on that. And if we use the Davy Crockett, actually that's a little insensitive. Let's not go to fucking Tokyo. Let's stick to New York right here. Let's go to Davy Crockett. Now, this is the smallest bomb ever made. If you played Metal Gear Solid 3, Colonel Volgin blew this shit up and launched an international crisis. Enough in that video game. Now, of course, that causes 3,270 people to be hurt, okay? Now, again, we're going to use this airburst, all right? Which, again, from what I understand is like the even deadlier version. But, yeah, if you look around real quick, you can actually see that as the Davy Crockett drops, you know, as the base drops, the yellow over here is the fireball radius, okay? At this point, if you're in this radius, like, if you're sitting in, like, if you're sitting on Crosby Street in this area, you're vaporized, you're gone, you're like, you're eliminated, you're basically you're Thanos snapped, all right? No joke. Now, of course, as you go outside the area, you're still going to be hurt, but this is where the radiation kicks in. So again, this is actually surprisingly more agonizing than had you died in this section, because here you're already at God's grace, okay? You're already done. You're Thanos snapped. Here, you're turning into a ghoul from Fallout 3, and it ain't pretty at that point. And again, this is light blast damage. This is where, like, it's you definitely don't want to be here, okay? You want to be, like, probably right around here in this park, completely out of the radius, because if you're in any situation here, it's gonna suck. Now, of course, if you go up, you can actually use the Tsar Bomba, which is the largest bomb ever detonated. Now, this actually doesn't exist anymore. The USSR, you know, Soviets, they tested this, and it was the only one ever made, and that's it. Now, of course, if you drop that one, you can actually start to see that the casualties, like right off the bat, all right, estimated, you know, evocatively, 7.6 million people, Thanos snapped. 4.1 million injuries right there. It's not a pretty sight. Of course, you can see that compared to the Davy Crockett, this one's definitely way more deadlier. Again, I want you to remember, this is the fireball radius. Once this thing drops, everyone in this section immediately Thanos snapped, okay? The heavy blast area, again, not pretty, heavy damage. And again, you can see that it goes all the way out from New York, all the way down to like New Brunswick. And basically, until you hit Rocky Hill, you're not having a good time with the Tsar Bomba. Now, what really freaks me out and adds further anxiety is this caused me to look at how fast, or basically how fast somebody would need in a position of power to respond to something like this, okay? So basically, when the emergency alert system is kicked in, effectively when that happens is when a response has actually been given, or when the threat has been identified. Now, if you want to look at some real scary scenarios in life, way back in the day, way back during the Soviet era in 1983, the Soviet Union got a nuclear false alarm, okay? So basically one operative, Stanislav Petrov, was working, you know, in basically the Soviet version of NORAD, as far as I know, their missile command, their basically, their assessment, their missile, like, defense force. And at this point, you know, he had received a viewpoint of one missile flying towards Russia. Then it became two. And eventually it had become 5 ICBMs headed to Russia. Now, from what happened over here, from what it came down to, this man had the option of reporting it to the Soviet military, which would have absolutely brought upon a nuclear response from the Soviets back to the United States. What had happened was this man decided not to report that, and it turned out that his gut feeling was right, because it turned out to be a complete false alarm. Apparently the missiles that were flying over to the Soviet side were, from what I understand, from what I've read, it turns out that that was basically a malfunction in the system because of the way sun reflections were happening. It was just a malfunction in the system. This man saved the world from nuclear Armageddon literally by not reporting a potential nuclear strike towards their country. That, my friend, is a true human being right there. Congratulations. But then, oh my god. Oh my god, look at that. Dude, Jesus Christ. This place looks like hell. No Amber Alerts yet. Nope, none of that shit so far. But yeah, let's get back to the whole topic. Where were we? Yeah, when you look at the actual response time for the president when it comes time, basically the 30-minute scenario of like a bomb flying near you and the EAS going off basically all hinges on the actual response time from the president as far as I've been able to read. So basically they've been given these gold codes, or it's known as a biscuit. Basically it's the codes that are assigned to the president every day by the NSA. These are like the nuclear launch codes. And basically what happens is the president is given minutes, literally minutes, to respond to an actual threat and attack. Basically, the president has no choice but to say yes, and basically by the president saying yes, or really any world leader saying yes, you have effectively signed the death warrant of the human race at that point, which absolutely might be the hardest, most anxiety-dripping decision any human ever has to make. Basically, they then they say, yep, strike back. They give their codes, and everyone in the chain of command basically is like, yeah, all right, we're doing this. Boom! End of the world right there. But yeah, that's one of the things that's been absolutely gripping my anxiety for the last few days. It's literally all my Reddit searches for the last several weeks, and it probably will be for the next few weeks too, until all this crisis dies over. But hey, I wanted to make a little video covering an interesting topic that's been gripping me all over tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I need to make sure this blizzard dies down. Take care. I'm out.